Watch this. That flicky wrist on your backhand is killing your shot. Here's exactly why it dumps into the net every time. If your backhand rip keeps dropping into the net, there's a good chance the problem is your wrist. Let me break down exactly why this happens and how to fix it. The second major reason for netting the ball is that when you rip, you're brushing too thin, your wrist is too loose, just flicking out like this. Watch my hand. The wrist whips sideways, the contact is paper thin, and the ball dives straight into the net. This is incredibly common. You see it everywhere players try to rip, the ball goes into the net, and then they give up and just push instead. That pushing motion, everyone knows it too well. It's the same mistake over and over. The core issue is that the wrist is too loose at contact. At the moment of impact, your force scatters, it doesn't transfer into the ball. Let me show you in slow motion so you can really see what's happening. Pay close attention because this affects a huge number of players. When you strike the ball, the contact isn't solid. Watch, the ball doesn't bite into the rubber. You haven't driven through it. You stop short and never actually rip forward. If you don't push through the ball, of course it drops into the net. So that's two causes of netting. First, jamming the ball too close to your body, and second, a wobbly wrist that produces weak, hollow contact. Next, so for the backhand rip, your racket angle must stay consistent. Don't open the face too much or close it too far down. If you do either extreme, you'll catch the edge of the blade. Now here's another reason you net the ball, watch this. Instead of driving forward through contact, you flip the wrist downward like this. See that motion? The racket face rolls under. The key point is this. When the ball arrives, you should be pushing forward into it, projecting the racket out toward the table. Instead, many of you do this. You turn the face down and scoop underneath. That downward flip kills your trajectory. Once you flip down, you lose solid contact and the ball drops into the net again. It simply won't follow the line you intended. Now that we understand the causes of netting, let's talk about what to do instead. First, keep your stroke stable, no extra movement. Second, on the backhand, you must drive through the ball and push forward. Watch, the ball comes in and my forearm projects straight ahead. Forward, forward, forward. Not this, not pulling down or flicking sideways after contact. Any of those deviations will send the ball into the net. Now let's look at why the ball goes long. Now I want to show you something. Watch carefully, I'll hit two balls with what looks like the same stroke. First one, second one. The second one sails long. Can you spot why? This is genuinely hard to detect, it's the wrist. At the moment of contact, the wrist wobbles just slightly. The backhand is even more sensitive than the forehand to this. A tiny wobble that you might get away with on the forehand will send a backhand rip flying off the end of the table. Watch my racket face closely. On the first ball, the face is locked. On the second, right at contact, there's a small flick outward. That fraction of movement changes the exit angle completely and the ball overshoots. Watch carefully. I swing from my left hip to my right hip. My racket face stays perfectly stable the whole way through. Now watch this version, just a tiny wobble, barely visible. That's all it takes. That small deviation is enough to send the ball long. The number one reason for overshooting on the backhand is exactly this. The reason it doesn't miss is that at the moment of contact, the racket face is very stable. The racket face stays steady, and then when you meet the ball, your friction should be strong, that brushing action right at contact. Watch, the friction is extremely focused with no wobble at all. And the force can't be too big. If you swing too hard, watch, the ball flies off the table. It has to be concentrated friction. Look, I'm using barely any force, and I can still send this ball flying long. So you absolutely must stay focused. Just like I said, the friction should feel like the ball almost can't clear the net. Then, on top of that foundation, I drive my forearm forward to rip through the ball and generate quality. Throughout this whole motion, the wrist stays relatively locked. If you're hitting a drive, you can't let the wrist wobble at all. That's how you produce a clean, punchy strike. The racket face must not waver. Racket face stability is critical.
对了，必须不能晃，因为拍面的稳定性很重要。
So when you rip, especially the friction stroke, the moment the rubber bites the ball, you brace right here. Watch this spot. If the wrist wobbles even slightly at contact, the ball misbehaves. See that? Just that tiny movement and it's gone. At the moment of contact, you must lock the wrist and let the forearm push forward. That's the engine of the rip. Not this, touching the ball while the wrist is still swinging loose. If you're flicking and contacting at the same time, forget about control. This is the single most important point. The backhand is even more sensitive than the forehand. The forehand can absorb a little wrist movement because you have more body mass behind it. The backhand has no such margin. Both sides need a stable racket face, but on the backhand, it's absolutely critical. After that, there's also a timing issue. Most of you aren't actually driving through the ball. Let me show you from the side. My partner feeds me one watch from this angle. Now, did my forearm go forward? Look again, it didn't. A lot of players genuinely can't tell on themselves. They think they're pushing forward, but they're not. It's much easier to spot on someone else. Watch one more time, see. No forward projection at all. Now here's what's really happening. The moment the forearm meets the ball, it stops here and the wrist just flips. That's fake forward motion. Look closely at what I did just now. The forearm stalled and only the wrist moved. That's not driving through the ball.
就是手腕搁这儿，看，这不就是夹往前吗？你看，你仔细看，我刚才是不是这样的？对，是不是？
Even on a compact stroke, the forearm must go forward. The forearm extending, that's what real forward motion looks like. Remember this, the forearm leads. Watch the difference. Fake forward, the wrist flips but the arm stays. Real forward, the forearm pushes out. Whether you're ripping or looping, it's the same principle. The forearm drives forward, and that's where your power actually comes from. You need that forearm extension to whip through the ball.
小臂往前，撕也是，小臂往前，拉也是。你看，小臂往前走，小臂往前走，你是不是才能甩出力量来？得需要小臂。你可以出界，这很好。
If you're overspinning, that's easy to fix. Just close the racket face and brush. The real danger is spending your whole playing life never learning to release power. Watch, this is fake forward motion. The arm stays put and only the wrist flips. What you need is like throwing a punch. Right now your fist stops here. It should fire forward from the forearm. The forearm punches out first. Only then can the rest of the stroke rotate behind it. If you're just flicking the wrist from a dead arm, the power never actually releases. Even without swinging hard, I can push the forearm forward like this. It puts real pressure on the opponent because I'm driving forward into the ball. Even top pros extend almost fully forward before recovering, all to push through the contact point. You have to be bold, commit forward, chase quality, chase speed. You don't need to be that extreme, but you genuinely cannot sit back here just flipping your wrist back and forth. That will never produce high-quality shots. Push forward through the ball.
觉得讲得很好，特别好，绝对是我们业余球的问题。对，都是痛点。